So can you tell me a little bit about why you decided to create Live from the Formosa?
Sure. I mean, I guess the notion of doing a podcast at all was just, sort of mostly hey, there's this new medium here. We should try it out.
Right.
And then I guess the actual form of that the podcast took was largely related to the fact that myself and two of the people who work in the same building as I do tended to have lunch at the Formosa Tea House 2 or 3 times a week, and so I just suggested to them maybe next week we'll take recording gear with us and make a podcast, and they said sure. And so the idea was that we would just take a tape recorder or a digital audio recording thing, whatever it was, and set it on the table beside us and essentially just talk over lunch essentially as we normally would, with a little bit more structure, and then record that mostly unedited to the, actually I think completely unedited as a podcast, just to see what would happen. So.
And what did happen? Did people
not
start?
Much. People listened to it, I guess. It wasn't as though we became internet superstars or anything.
No.
I think we got some positive feedback, and it certainly gave us some opportunity to experiment with podcasting and figure out what it was, and in a sense contribute to the development of the medium, I guess. Just to sort of point the way for other people who might actually have real and important things to say rather than just idle lunchtime conversation.
Right. What is podcasting?
Are you asking me now, or are you asking me as I was thinking about it then?
Well, both. How about both?
I think at that point, it would have been more of a sort of an extension of a weblog more than a medium distinct in its own right, because that's essentially what, from a technical perspective, it was simply a way to add an audio file to a weblog post, and that was sort of its technical birth, and it's obviously evolved from there and has sort of been able to divorce itself largely of that past. At least, it hasn't been locked into that format. Now, I guess it's certainly evolved to the point where podcasting and blogging are taken as being two separate mediums. And I guess I'm not doing it so much myself anymore, so it's not a question I give a lot of thought to these days. I'm certainly a podcast consumer, and I guess I would probably say that podcasting has taken the place of a lot of the radio listening I would have done at one point. So I think and the kind of podcasts that I listen to are either usually extensions of or additions to existing radio programs, or they are programs sort of presented in a radio-like format, sometimes by people who have a radio background. So probably I would see it mostly now as a different delivery mechanism for audio journalism, I guess.
Right. Do you listen to any independent podcasts nowadays?
Yeah. There's for example, there's a business person in Chicago who has a podcast called The Travel Commons, and he produces it once every 2 or 3 weeks, and it's just him talking into a microphone about business travel and things that have happened to him in airports and things like that. But I also listen to the BBC Film Reviews, which is the sort of the opposite end of that in terms of independence, I guess. So it's probably a mixture of the two, I think.
Can you talk a little bit about the development of your podcast, and why you're not doing it anymore? There was, I think, 4 episodes of Live from the Formosa.
I think there were. Yeah.
Can you talk about how you went from the first one to the next one to the following one?
I wouldn't say that there was anything as organized as thought that went into the process. It was more, we did one as an experiment, and it worked, and so we went for a while longer, and then we, at lunch one day we said, oh, maybe we should do another podcast. So probably as deep as it got would have been, we felt, maybe one of us had just gone on a trip, or another of us had just done some technical thing. So we sort of accumulated enough to form what we thought would be a slightly more interesting than usual lunchtime conversation, I guess.
Right. And why did you decide to stop being on the producing end of podcasting?
I don't know if I don't know if we've stopped. We've just gone longer between episodes 4 and 5.
Okay, fair enough.
Several years, I guess, in this case. But Yeah, no, I think it's just we've become distracted by other more shiny internet objects, I guess, is one way of answering that.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit about your company and what you do?
Yeah. The house that I work out of is in downtown Charlottetown. It's a house actually owned by a web development company called Silver Orange, and
Okay.
it's two of the principals at Silver Orange who are my co-conspirators in Live
Mhm.
from Formosa Tea House. But my company's called Reinvented, and we rent a floor of the house from them. And both of our companies are roughly in the same business of developing websites and web technology for businesses and governments and others.
Mhm.
But we're both small companies. My company's just two people, and theirs is about 13. So
And if you don't mind my asking, how old are you?
that's a good question. 42?
Uh-huh. So you were in your late 30s when you recorded your first podcast.
I guess that would be true, yes.
Okay. And you said you're a podcast consumer. Do you have any opinions as to where podcasting is going? I mean, with the inclusion of things like the BBC podcasts and CBC and NPR and all that, sort of has been saturating the market, the podcast community, I guess, more so in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's. I mean, I guess if you look at it from a the position of someone who's trying to market their someone who's concerned about people listening to their podcast, it's probably harder to get people to listen to it just because there are more choices that people have.
Mhm.
I mean, I think one of the things about Live from Formosa Studios that was perhaps unusual, although I don't think unique, is we didn't really. It wasn't like we thought, oh, there are thousands of people out there who would be interested in listening to us have lunch. It was more, very much more a sort of a producer or production-oriented thought process than a consumer or consumption thought process, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Um, and I think that there are lots of people who do podcasts that they do it because it's a fun thing to do, and it's an interesting thing that some people might listen to it, but they might even do it if nobody listened to it, and
Mhm.
that would probably be more our category than seeing ourselves being in a marketplace where we're fighting for market share or anything like that. So.
Right. That being said, though, were there any amazing responses or things that surprised you for the listening audience that did end up tuning in?
No, not really. I don't. To be honest, I don't know if we actually ever heard from anyone. I mean,
Okay.
there might have been some, comments on blog posts where we talked about the episodes, but
Mhm.
I can't remember anything profound or amazing.
Okay. Is there anything else you think I should know about your process out there and what the front live from the Formosa Tea House was? And it is I have to be honest with you. It's going to play a role in this thesis that I'm putting together regarding
Well,
podcasting in Canada.
there we go. Maybe that's our biggest impact ever then. No, I mean, I guess probably part of what we were trying to do is just try on for ourselves how this would work, and then I think we were fairly rigorous about trying to document how we did it. I think
Mhm.
when we blogged about it, we talked about the microphone we used and the little mixing board and how we maybe put the intro and the extra on it and that sort of thing. And that was as much just to convince other people that it was possible and that they could do it as anything else, I think. So it was probably more of a technology proof of concept than a unified idea. So uh, yeah, and certainly in terms of podcasting in general, that would be the side of podcasting that would continue to interest me more from the production side. I mean, just the notion that anyone with some ideas and some ability to put them together can do that in a way that, I mean, I have a background in community radio originally, and it was a lot harder to do the same things when you needed to worry about like paying for a transmitter and a
Mhm.
studio and all those sorts of things.